Well, well, well. Yeah, they were having a chit chat with someone who fought with Steven about stuff and things. Uh, Yo, how's it going, bud? Good to hear. Good to hear. It's been pretty chill, pretty nice. Work has been boring as fuck, so it's nice to not have to do anything, I guess. Uh, how about you? Get home all right and all that? Nice. Do you say what you do, or right, right? But you're right. Yeah, I think it's. I don't know. Honestly, it's kind of hard to. I don't know. You picked a pretty deep topic to go over in like 10 minutes, which it's like right, right, yeah, yeah. Trump bad. Anything else? Not. Or like the Photoshop picture he had at like the desk. Oh, no, I haven't seen that. I'm actually like a day and a half behind on news. Strangely enough. Yeah. Right. I mean, I think so. I guess I don't know. I heard what you said on stage. Obviously. I also heard what you said. Um, or I heard a little bit. You were chatting with a friend of mine. I heard a little bit of that, and I guess I don't know. As it stands, I guess I feel like I mostly agree. In the sense that I think our messaging could be a lot better, aimed towards like certain groups of people. I think that's really where the right, or just MAGA in general, excels, is like that populist rhetoric of like, oh, all your problems are actually really simple to solve, and it's all these guys' fault, and we can just point the finger at them. Um, but yeah, I guess I don't know. I guess it feels like the world is slightly more complicated than that currently, and I don't quite know how to go about doing that. I guess. Um,
Wait, is this the wrong? I feel like this is not correct. Maybe not. Let's see. So here's some quotes. And this one is the biggest drag on post neoliberalism is the failure of ambition and imagination of its architects. Um, so this is kind of where I wanted to go is like, or maybe not this exact point, but we know that materialism doesn't work, but we don't really have a good understanding of like where to go beyond it. Um, do you have any immediate reactions to that?
Yeah. So I guess when you say materialism, like you mean focusing on, I don't know, like the kitchen, like like you mean like the material conditions, like the price of stuff and like
Yeah,
standard of living and that type of stuff.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I don't know. I guess I struggle with that just because like I don't know. We
Mhm.
lost the last election like based on material conditions. Um, and so I mean I don't know. Like maybe that's a point in your favor of like, oh, see, like it just doesn't work. But I guess I don't know. It worked for them really well, obviously. Uh,
So I think the thing I tried to say at the very end was that like I think people default to the material conditions when when they're trying to say my life is not meaningful. But they don't have the words to say that. They don't know how to say that in a nuanced and interesting way, in a way that can be measured. So they say the cost of buying eggs is too high instead. I don't actually think people care all that much about material conditions. Like if you look at the demographics, the Democrats, win, like the poor by far vote Democrat. Um, it's really it's people that like are doing fine. Like they have general well-being. They just don't have like they're just like dealing with an opioid crisis or something like that. Like they're not dealing with an opioid crisis because they're poor. They're dealing with it because like they nothing is seems like worth doing, you know?
yeah, fair. Yeah, I guess a combination of nothing to do and access is like yeah, what leads to that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess like I don't know. I struggle because I guess like you specifically brought up like Trey at the event.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you're like, oh, he has like two houses and you know a family and like feels bad about like where he's at. Um, yeah, I guess
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I guess you would obviously say, or I think you would say that like, oh, like that's just because like maybe he's lacking some meaning, and like needs to feel like more fulfilled. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, I would say he's been brainwashed into thinking that like no matter like how much he gets, he still deserves more, or that like even though he's not wanting, he could still have more. Um, and like I guess I don't know. I guess I could relate
Well,
that back.
so what is that? I'm interested in that because it's like, how would you how would you know if it's something like, or like what would that look like versus someone that actually did like lack some kind of meaningful fulfillment?
I mean, like when you when you have like two houses, you have a steady job, you have a family, like like you
Mhm.
can provide and like do things how you want, and you're not really like lacking anything. You just feel like you're lacking something. Um, yeah, I guess I'm not. I don't know. Like I guess I would say that dude has no right to feel that way. And I don't know. I'd be curious to talk to him more about like, well, what like what do you mean? Like it's like, oh, like I might have to like sell my second house, or like, it's getting harder to afford property tax on my rental property. Like those are, I don't know. This is these are very much like middle class people's problems that like want to act like they're like working class but live like they're like super wealthy. Um,
Sure. I guess so. I mean, I feel like I mean, it's not like he can, pay people to organize and do something. Like, he doesn't have that much money, you know? He has just enough money where he doesn't have to worry about the material conditions, but not enough money to, like, kinda pursue anything he wants to pursue. Like, he kinda has to stay in his job, and I feel like we all kind of understand that, jobs kinda suck. Like, they don't actually fulfill you, you know?
I mean, so I will warn you, I do have terminal autism, so I like working. I have a usefulness where my self worth should be. But yeah, I
Okay.
like working. I'm like a busy person. I'm more of a human doing than a human being. Like I
Sure.
like kind of vaguely got into streaming and debating people online because I spend already, like 10 or 20 hours a week, like doing research and reading science stuff. 'Cause I'm a loser. Uh, so, but
I wouldn't
yeah, I
call that
mean,
being a loser.
I mean, it's funny for me if I do. But yeah, but like, I mean, I don't own. I mean, I own zero houses. Like like probably couldn't afford a family like right now. And yeah, I mean, I guess like I don't know. Like yeah, he's stuck at his job, I guess. But I don't know if he lost his job. Like how long would it be before he like was desperate and had to get another one? Like I mean, he could sell that other house and do some crazy project if he wanted to. But like that passive income is nice.
I
Uh,
mean, he's paying a mortgage on it, both of the houses. It's not like
right, right. But you get like some pretty nice tax benefits for the first house, and like your first house is super affordable in the U.S. Like there's all kinds of you get like your FHA preferred loans with very little down with very nice interest rates. It's that those earning properties are what really get you.
yeah. When I talk to him, and I don't really know much about home ownership, to be honest. So I wouldn't even be able to like. I didn't really know what I was saying, to be honest. But he was talking about how like he wanted to move or something. And that's why he has to, and he's trying to sell the other one. Um, but I just figured like, if you're at the point where you can like have two houses at the same time, you're probably doing pretty well for yourself, even if you don't like it wasn't like an intentional decision or like an expansion of your equity. Um, like, do you feel lucky that view work in that way, or do you feel like most people view work in that way?
Oh yeah, no, I feel super lucky. I So when I was in middle school in the same year, I learned about DNA and HTML. And I just kind of knew it's like, oh, I want to be a genetic researcher because it's like the source code for people, and we can just fix all the broken stuff. And then I learned about
Mhm.
the Nazis a few years later and was like, don't phrase it like that. Uh, but yeah, no, I mean, I've always considered myself like super lucky to just know from age 12 like what I would like to do with the rest of my life because I know I don't know I met enough third year undeclared majors just like I don't know what I want to do with my life. Like, well, that sucks. Uh, um, but yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so from that lens, and if we consider trade, like I mean, I like let's just say some hypothetical person, like maybe not maybe Trey doesn't feel this way, but like some hypothetical person in similar circumstances as Trey, and I'm sure there are many that support MAGA. Um, I feel like the majority of them are going to be in a job that, is kind of just a job. It's not really like a it's not making them feel like they're contributing their best to the world or they're contributing something unique to the world. Or that they're like part of something unique.
Right. That's why they get swept up in a cult. Uh, um,
Maybe, yeah.
right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's what I think that's what MAGA preys on is a bunch of kind of souls feeling lost. 'Cause, yeah, like most, I wouldn't disagree. I do think most jobs do suck. Like I don't know what trade does specifically, but yeah, I mean, if you're at somewhere that's just something to pay the bills, then yeah, that's gonna be not a fun time. For sure. Um,
Right, but and so then the question is like I don't think, making housing more affordable or solving climate change or um, you know, what are some other things? Um I guess those are the two big ones. I'm thinking of like like things in abundance. I have to actually go like read abundance. I've just been like reading
right.
summaries about it and stuff. Um, but it seems like more of that kind of stuff isn't going to solve that problem. Isn't going to solve that root cause of people getting sucked into MAGA.
Right. But yeah, I mean, like like we need people to research green energy solutions. We need to fix fucking zoning laws because they're absolutely cancer right now.
Yeah,
And like actually build more houses. But like yeah, like maybe there are a lot of carpenters that would like to build houses for people. Build affordable houses for people who need them. Maybe Trey would prefer to make the next generation of solar cells. Um, but yeah, I mean, not going to get there by like not funding those programs.
but what I'm saying is like for the people that come after Trey, like the fact that we did that, we solved that problem, it's not going to solve this underlying root cause, this issue of people not feeling like, of people being unsatisfied with material wealth.
Yeah, because I mean, like wealth, as I say, like money doesn't buy happiness, but it doesn't hurt at all. Like it can give you freedom to
Yeah.
actually pursue that happiness. But I guess like okay, so when you say this underlying like root cause,
hmm
um, I guess
Well,
like
because
what do you
I thought we had established that like people are getting sucked in because they kind of didn't really feel all that fulfilled by their job, but like they see themselves as like financially stable.
right? Yeah, I guess like I feel like it's a really it's a much wider problem. Uh,
Sure. Yeah.
Societally, like just because like we don't like a few thousand years ago we weren't going into a factory and doing the same motion for 12 hours in a row and then going home
hmm
feeding your kids and going to sleep. You got to
Yeah, it wasn't
go.
all laid out for you
Right,
very
right,
clearly and explicitly
right,
with zero really room for innovation because it's already all been innovated to death.
right. Yeah, no, we used to be able to go out and pick berries and maybe hunt something and then fix our clothes and make a fire and all that, and maybe die of fucking sepsis. um uh But yeah, I guess like I don't know, like I don't know if government can treat that problem, or even really that most people
Well,
understand
so
that
so I
problem.
think I think I think that's the issue, right? That like we kind of we see that materialism isn't enough. We don't know. We all agree that whatever the answer is, we don't know what the answer is. But we get super mad at MAGA people for being MAGA. It's like why do we insist that we need to solve these material conditions before we can actually address this like really big problem of meaning? And that's why I was saying, like, the only person talking about it was Jordan Peterson. And then when Jordan Peterson was talking about it, we were like, no, fuck you. And then Jordan Peterson was like, well, actually, I like he's saying like some borderline, probably not borderline, like legitimately like sexist stuff. And it's just like, okay, well, we can't really have this guy be the lead. And it's like, okay, but then someone needs to actually talk about it.
Right. I think I mentioned at the event, John Vervaeke also has like a very nice
Oh yeah,
encapsulation of stuff. The
I
meaning,
actually have to go
the meaning
remind
crisis
myself what his stuff is.
for sure. Yeah, it's like yeah, I don't know. I can't really sum it up into a handful of sentences because it's very kind of esoteric and and also I haven't finished it. Uh, but yeah, I also like I don't get mad at MAGA for getting like swept up into a cult. I get mad at MAGA for just contradicting themselves and destroying my fucking country and just like cheering on as it raises. Like I don't know, it's a complete like lack of standards. Um, uh, yeah, I mean, I'm not mad at people for just intrinsically for being MAGA. It's the downstream effects of like, oh, you
Sure.
voted for a traitor. Like I
I
like
guess it's like, well, so do you reject the framing that MAGA people insist on solving this problem of meaning and making that the priority, and liberals insist on making material depredation the priority? Because
um
both are real, like both are like absolutely things that are really big issues.
I mean, I think all MAGA is built on is like epically owning the libs at all costs. Um, just like whatever they do, like fuck them. Yeah, that's.
I mean, like,
I mean, I don't think MAGA is giving anyone is solving this like meaning. Like
well,
yeah,
I don't
maybe
think
they feel like they're
I don't
part
think
of
they are
something.
either. I think they are emoting that they want to solve it. They want people to think about it and they want people to attempt to solve it, but don't have they don't have any academic rigor. They abandon rigor, but but like, temperamentally, you know, genetically, biologically, socially, that's their priority. Um and liberals, we've seen how effective addressing material conditions are. Um, and so we're kind of like defaulting to it to make things better. But there's like diminishing marginal returns. So it's kind of like, and of course we can innovate and we will innovate and and like there are plenty of ways to make things a lot better. But I don't know, like, what about, like, what is inherently wrong about that framing, I guess. I think that was the question. Sorry if I took too long to land the plane.
Um, yeah, I guess I like the feeling of being part of something. I don't think is their primary thrust. I think they're out, you know, doing a bunch or aiming at a bunch of other goals, and like feeling like they're changing things. Well, I mean, they are changing things. That's for goddamn sure. Um, uh, yeah, that's just like kind of a yeah. It's just a byproduct of um, it's just kind of a byproduct of the destruction that they're causing. It's like look at all this radical stuff that we're doing and all this crazy change that's happening. Like we did that, but I don't think it's like it's again it's a war on like due process and rule of law and democracy and trans
So
people.
why can't those all be symptoms of this underlying desire for meaning and community, something like that, cohesiveness?
I mean, I guess it can. I would just like guess I would need that to be established. It just doesn't like
Sure. Well,
yeah.
so what do you, when you say you needed to be established, what would that look like for you?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess just like kind of I don't know if you can give me like a handful of or if you can like connect a few dots in between there. Uh, yeah, I guess
Okay,
I'd
so
be open to it.
I mean, this is like a blind spot for me because like it seems very connected to me, but can you let me know like where you might see that there's like a disconnect?
Yeah, for sure. Or I guess like what led you to this conclusion? Like what makes you think that this is what like this is the best framing that like, it
Hmm.
explains things? Um, I guess like I don't know.
So I think the a big part was recently, and I might be going out of order. Well, okay, let me start from the very beginning because, like, because I've been thinking about this for almost a decade now. Um, I think people in general were missing. Were like not didn't really know. Like, I think I had been observing this problem of people getting shunted into college and not really knowing what they wanted to do, and kind of feeling like they don't really know why they're doing what they're doing. They're just told to learn something, get good at it, and then be a productive member of society. Um, and so I've been really interested in like personality research, and I've learned a lot about that, and I've come to my own understanding of it, um, and and like what I think meaning means for people. And I think that like that conversation is just not happening at all. Um, so so I think the starting point for me is like I think this meaning problem is like massive. It is absolutely a drain on society that we're not solving this. And we're not really even talking about it, or like it's not being discussed in schools. Like, what is the purpose of your life? That's not something that you really like write essays on, um, or like learn how to write an essay on. You can talk about it, but it's not something that we like teach as part of the curriculum. Like, you're gonna learn how like to decide what the purpose of your life is. Um, the so I'd worked on that for a long time, and then more recently, I had been thinking about what, and then I'd also thought about like paradigm shifts, and how like we had neoliberalism, now we're in post neoliberalism, and then before that there was like Keynesianism and stuff like that, and so like you have like different ideologies that ebb and flow or replace each other over time. Um, the article I sent you talks about a little bit, like talking about how like they're not none of them are like normatively or objectively correct, but they're like normatively useful or something along those lines. Or maybe they said like normatively correct. It's like something like divine right to lead. Like, that is useful when you don't have science, but then once you like demonstrate the value of democracy, like the idea of a divine right to lead doesn't really make any sense. So, but it's useful, for when it existed, and it did help organize society. It did make better societies to like have that kind of shorthand. Um, so to me, it's like, okay, so this meaning thing that could be something replacing neoliberalism. It could be something replacing this liberal order, this globalist order, or the globalist like culture. Um, so that's kind of like, so like if there is a paradigm shift, I want to bring it to the surface, and if MAGA is like trying to seek that, so that's another place where I'm coming from. So it's like maybe this meaning thing is part of that paradigm shift. Um, so those two things are like the kind of the foundation of where I'm coming from, and but then layered on top of it is some more specifics, like I think the masculinity crisis, or whatever you want to call it, like the red pill movement, um, is a really big example of how this kind of maps onto different things that MAGA is interested in, um, or like things that have aligned with MAGA. The um, and I guess like those are the three big things that I've just kind of been like connecting the dots between, um, and specifically looking at gender roles and that as like risk taking versus risk aversion. Um, and we can kind of talk about that. I'm kind of just like giving a broad overview here, not trying to like establish this as fact. Um, so that's kind of high level where I'm coming from. I don't know what your takeaway is so far.
For sure. I guess, yeah, very high level. Uh,
Yeah.
sorry.
I mean, I can talk about something more specific too. I just wanted to make sure that there was like some context.
Right. Yeah. I guess maybe give me some more specifics. I'm like
Sure.
I kind of get what you're putting down, but
Okay, so I think a good thing to talk about is like, what do you think gender roles should be? Like, should we have gender roles? Should we not have gender roles? I think um the best way to think about gender roles is to just say like men are risk tolerant and they're willing to take risks, and women are and this is averages on average, um, more risk averse, and then like biologically this is like seems to be correlated with amygdala response that like and how hormones work and stuff like that, that like women tend to have a greater amygdala response, and like they're more neurotic and things like that, and it's like um kind of feeds into being risk averse. And like I don't really see neuroticism as necessarily a negative thing either.
yeah.
But like that's just like, what the factor analysis shows that like that's the trend. And so I think like organizing society around this idea of like a male risk tolerant gender role and a female risk averse gender role kind of makes sense. Would be my position there. I haven't like connected that to MAGA yet, but just like trying to kind of establish, like, see where if we even agree on this kind of thing first.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I don't know. I feel like that's kind of I don't know, like super reductive. Or I
Sure.
guess like I don't necessarily like disagree. I do think men on average take more risks than women. Probably why our life expectancy is shorter. Um, uh, but yeah, I guess I feel like there are probably other traits that play into that. Um,
Explain what specifically?
um, yeah. Uh, I mean, I guess. Or, sorry. Sorry. When I think about gender roles, I mean, I think about a lot of different things. Like, I mean,
Sure,
like,
sure.
like I don't know. I would break gender down into like three categories of internal gender identity, your gender expression, and like that kind of
Yeah,
interacts with
yeah, and we
societal
can talk
gender
about that.
roles.
Okay, so you're saying internal identity, the expression, and I think I cut you off at the third one.
Yeah, and then like wider in society, like gender roles, that
Okay.
kind of that your gender expression slash identity like tends to align with. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think so. The way that I incorporate that into my understanding is, um, I think there's so I'm not sure how best to talk about this. Like, I could just show you the science that I'm referencing, or maybe I don't know what would be preferable to you, or like in general. But I think um, so there's a type of person that, and regardless of your gender, of like your sex, you are. Some people are more um are kind of like warriors, and other people are not warriors, basically. um, and 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 how I describe it is like some people are like, well, risk averse, and some people are risk tolerant, and it kind of comes down to, do you have to think, or do you, or so I think the scientific, sorry, I'm not I'm workshopping how to describe this. Like, it's not something I've done really all that much before, so I'm
sure,
kind of
you're good.
stumbling here. So
Take your time.
um the the risk averse profile is kind of like, you'd say that they have high emotional suppression. So like um they have a lot of anxiety, concerns that and they think about a lot of the fine details. Oh yeah, so sorry, yeah, detail oriented is a better way to say it. So you have people that are detail oriented, and then you have people that are like much more big picture. And the reason why people are detail oriented might be because they're seeing all the different ideas and details and connections, not really sure how to organize them, but then they're very they put a lot of cognitive effort into kind of making sense of everything. So you'd call that high cognitive reappraisal, high cognitive control, however you want to describe it. Um, and what that results is like a very, very nuanced and detailed understanding of an issue or a topic or whatever, or like an event. And then you have people that are more big picture oriented, where they don't really have a lot of like emotional reaction to things. Like they're not really suppressing anything. It's kind of just like they make knee jerk assumptions and broad generalizations about things, and like, yeah, that works. And then, well, they also combine it with cognitive reappraisal, but just a lot less. So they're ready to adjust what their generalization is, and they're pretty flexible about it, but they don't put nearly as much effort as the people that are like really detail oriented. And I think it's very helpful for both types of people to exist, um, because being able to look at something and synthesize it is very useful, but also like not missing details is very useful. But also when you're synthesizing stuff and looking at it, like you tend not to overthink it, you know, um, and you're more decisive. And so it's like you combine these two people together, and they kind of make up for each other's flaws. Where it's like if you have detail oriented people, sometimes they can be overly pessimistic or something like that. Um, and not willing to take risks. And so, but sometimes you do need to take risks. So, um, and that's and the interesting thing is like obviously that distinction, that those profiles are not unique to men or women. Like there's plenty of men that are detail oriented, plenty of women that are um big picture thinkers.
Yeah, the
Um,
distribution's bimodal for sure. I mean, like,
Yeah. So and it's interesting that it actually like you do like latent profile analysis, which is like putting it into actual personalities, and it's not like a continuous distribution. It's like it's a very it actually is a bimodal distribution between those two types of people. Um, and there's actually more where it's like you can have unhealthy people that have high anxiety but then low cognitive reappraisal. So they're just anxious all the time and have no idea what's going on. And it's like that's like psychotic person, like um
yeah, I married one of those.
um, so uh the so I stumbled my way through all of that to kind of point to how you were saying like just because someone has a gender role doesn't mean that matches their internal experience. So you want to look at that, what is that internal experience rather than what is their sex.
Right. I mean, I guess that.
And then there's also like an interaction between your sex and like if you're a detail oriented person um or a big picture person too.
I guess like can you tie this back into like the meaning thing or I guess like I don't know.
Sure.
Is
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
Do you feel like these people aren't finding like their roles or like their matches to like to balance each other out or?
Sure. So like the idea is, okay, let's look at what government has kind of tended toward for the last 40 years, and it's a lot of risk aversion. It's become increasingly risk averse. And I think if you look at historical party lines, um there wasn't really a gender gap between Republicans and Democrats, but now there is. And that's an indication that like, I mean, there's lots of reasons why that could be, but I think it the way that I make sense of it is as using that as evidence that to support like the assumption or like the observation that a lot of people are making that Democrats in general are very risk averse and that like and that what didn't used to be a conservative or liberal value has now become like risk aversion is a liberal value, risk taking is a conservative value. Like that didn't used to be the case, but now it is. And um that's like a very recent phenomenon.
I guess, or well, all right. I guess I have two agreements here.
Sure.
I would say that like, I mean, like the progressives, are Democrats. Like they're pushing into the great unknown future. I
Okay.
would say of like, like they want to shake up the whole paradigm, and they want to, whatever. There's fucking gender anarchists there who think that we should just beat that out of the human race.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know. I guess I would also say I think the gender gap is way more simply explained by Democrats stop giving a fuck about like men's problems. Like I mean, if you look at the, like the complete switch in the gender gap in education over the past like 70 years since Title IX was introduced. Like there was like a 13-point gap in favor of men for college graduation when Title IX was put into place, and now that same gap exists in the opposite direction. Like we're hitting a point where we need to talk about doing like affirmative action like for men to get into college.
Yeah.
But like I can't say that in front of my progressive friends. Like they'll just they'll be like, well, but men were in charge for so long, and we deserve a chance to catch up. And it's like, well, that's not how that works, dog.
So I would say that the Democrats not grappling with men's issues is like, to me, when I say I'm going to boil down gender roles down to risk like your risk assessment or how you manage risk, like I think you could boil down men's issues into like, obviously not completely, but you can capture significant amount of the what is the word? The error. um I don't think there's like a layman way to say that. Oh, there is, but not in that exact way. Anyway, but I'm not saying you're a layman. I was just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, for sure.
The right, yeah. So you can capture most of that by saying, men just want to take more risks, and they feel like that society is set up so that you're not taking risks. Society is set up so that you do the sure thing, you do the thing that is going to, ensure you have a good life and a secure future. Um, and and then the other thing you're talking about with like how progressives are constantly pushing the envelope. Well, like I think the populist wing of the left is just way less politically powerful than the populist thing of the right. And I think that is like, I think a lot of populism is about, taking risks. So like that's how I would respond to that. I don't know if that's convincing to you or not.
I mean, like, yeah, I don't know. I guess it's just or I don't know. When I think about like what risks Republicans are taking, it's like literally just
It's
with,
very
like
stupid,
civil
yes.
rights. But like like they're not trying to push for like here's this crazy new technology we found. Like they're not like they're not pushing forward. Oh, we could make an mRNA vaccine for literally every virus that we know of right now, and just have it like just in case something comes up. Like they're not. Elon claims he's making a flying car. At the end of this year, or end of last year, or whatever the fuck. But yeah, I guess I don't see like what risk they're taking. Like they're just trying to be
Well, so,
regressive.
yeah, it's very stupid. They're taking risks without any of the risk assessment. So there's no assessment of like, does this risk actually have, a calculable probability of high return? So it's like there's none of that. It's just we're gonna tariff people because this is something we haven't been doing, and it's a big and bold idea. We're going to skirt due process because it's because things are happening too slow, and we must get the immigrants out at all costs. Like all these risks that they're taking are not they're not calculated, and that's the issue. It's not the fact that they're not taking risk, I guess.
Fair. I guess I don't know. I guess I don't know. I guess it's not a very satisfying answer to be like, oh yeah, it's all just they're just like taking risks, just kind of rolling the dice on stuff. And it's like I don't think they really know what I mean. They know what they're doing. They're like get all the
Sure, yeah. So I'm not trying to say this is. I'm trying to, or in my head anyway. All of this is very unconscious. It's like they don't realize that this is what they're doing. They're kind of like like the conscious level is we're owning the libs. Like you're absolutely correct there. That the conscious level is we're owning the libs, we're being bigoted, and we're exploring taboos or whatever. Or I don't even think that they understand that. Like we're just being bigoted and hating DEI and whatever, and we're like we're asserting that there's only two genders. Whatever they want to say, they're consciously doing. Um, I'm purely talking at like and psychoanalyzing at like the unconscious level of like what would you say if you had the actual language?
yeah. I don't know. I guess I don't know. It feels like roughly as satisfying an answer as when they say like this is what God would want, or like America should be a country for you know white European Christians
Mhm.
or whatever the fuck. I guess so. Like what? Like how would you proceed from here then? What?
Yeah.
Do you have anything uh specifically
So
to?
I just thought of this today. Um, so I'm interested in seeing how it lands. Um, I think so. If we know that MAGA is, or if we assume, right? Like I'm not going to say I convinced you of this. So if we assume that MAGA is, they're really just seeking meaning and they don't know how to communicate that. They don't know how to articulate it. And a lot of that meaning stems from this tension between risk taking and risk aversion, like this like kind of dichotomy, yin and yang. Um, and liberals kind of understand that materialism isn't working, and so they understand that there is some meaning to be had, but no one really knows how to actually go about instituting it because it's really really complicated. Um, I think we kind of embrace that. We embrace the idea that this shit is complicated. We don't need leaders telling us what we should be doing. I think what we do is we have leaders tell us this is the effects of what you're trying to do. Like we still have experts measuring things and calculating things and providing guidance, but we don't have experts telling us this is how society is going to be organized. I think that we need to rapidly democratize our decision making process, and make it more accessible for everyone. Because right now, like um, a lot of our idea generation is just like whoever has a lot of money will throw out their idea, market it, and then that's the idea that people are talking about for like the next 2 months. Um, and or if they like already have like established political power, then like if you're like a journalist or in those circles, like that can happen too. Um, but it's very very top heavy, like actually figuring out like what are the possible ways forward, what are those ideas. So we need to figure out how to do that, and I think a big part of it is two things come to mind. One, like the idea of bowling alone, of how America is desperately seeking third spaces again, and how we've lost all of our third spaces. We lost unions and we lost religion. Um, and those are a big things that people use to find social connections. And then the other is like I sometimes think about like the quote, like, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. And it's like you toy around with the idea, like, what if a Democrat said that today? It's like they'd be fucking put up on a cross. Um
They just followed the
and
law.
and so it's like I but I think like that might be the way to go, that um we democratize what are the types of organizations that people want. Are they religious? Are they secular? Are they some type of scientific exploration? Are they some type of nonprofit exploration? Um, and we kind of we create institutions that help people organize themselves around an idea. And it doesn't matter what that idea is, and they don't even have to measure it. Like we just give people grants for organizing people, for getting people on the same page. And it's like the more people you get, like you get exponentially more money, the more people you get like working on the same project. Um, and of course, like you have bureaucrats still measuring the impact and analyzing the effectiveness and determining, like, here's a risk and here's a risk assessment of what you're proposing to do. And ideally people trust those experts. But in terms of like actually saying like, oh, this sounds like a good idea, that's democratically decided um through some kind of dispersed decision making means. And I think it needs to be like, what are institutions, what are organizations that people want to be a part of, that people want to go into time debt, right? Like that people want to just pursue despite knowing that they're not getting anything out of it in the immediate term. For the future of their country, for the future of their own life, and for the future of their children. Like, what are people willing to organize around for no money? And then we start paying those people once they do start organizing. Like that's the kind of thing. That's how I think. That's kind of where my head's at, anyway. I don't know how appealing that is to you.
Yeah, I mean I think it's super appealing. Again, it's I don't know. I guess it's a very like high level idea. I guess. Of,
Yeah, it's
I
not
don't
very
know.
detailed.
Right. Like I don't not to out myself, but you ever heard of like Burning Man?
No. Well, yes, but not. I don't know what it is. I've heard of it.
So I mean, like the big version is it's just some big fucking party in the desert, but it's organized around like 10 principles of like decommodification, like radical inclusion, and like just whatever, a lot of the same like principles of that you're kind of talking about, that I whatever, like they have like smaller regional events that I may or may not have attended, but yeah, I mean, I feel like it's doing a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, where it's like it's like, oh, we all show up, we all work together, we're all sharing, and we take part in this thing together, and then we get the fuck out. Um, which
Right.
I think is like a super cool thing. I guess I just don't know how. I don't know. I'm trying to think about like the LPO has been shut down, USAID's been shut down, our zoning laws are all fucked, and like climate
Mhm.
refugees are gonna start happening, soon. TM. And I guess I'm I don't know, when it comes to like culture and stuff. Uh, I guess I don't know how much of a role I want the government to have, and I don't know how much I trust people to like
Well, I
democratizing
think
that makes me.
I think
Or
you're right that, or maybe I cut you off too soon, but I totally agree that government this should not be a top down decision determining what the culture is. Um, Although I will say, I think the difference between what I'm proposing and Burning Man is that like I'm looking for organizations of people that are enduring, so not just like a pop up kind of project. But
right,
like
right.
like so basically taking state capacity and making it run by civilians rather than bureaucrats, if that makes sense.
I guess we're like we're facilitating this through bureaucrats, and we need this to
Yes,
be
yes.
enduring, like through radical shifts in composition of government. Um,
Well, so it would be enduring. I don't think you'd need a radical shift in the government
or
because
no, or sorry. So like one of the biggest deciders of whether or not a government program stays alive or not is whether or not like the government changes hands with respect to who's the majority party. Like most
okay,
new government programs like get shut down within 10 years, almost always like after like the composition changes. And so
that makes
to
sense.
like have this like big cultural movement that's like being spearheaded like by the government that's going to last more than 10 years is um it's not, yeah, like
Well,
our
so when you say government programs, I like because I think there's like things like science funding, for example, that like at the very least we spend about the same amount of money on science funding regardless, or we used to anyway, regardless of who was in power. Um, and like Bush and Clinton massively increased NIH. Um, so I don't know. Maybe that's not really relevant. Um,
yeah, I mean
like
like
I'm just trying to. I was more thinking about like it seems like it is possible to create like the institution that does the thing, even if what it actually is doing kind of depends on who's in power. Like at the very least, we're funding science. It just the type of science might change.
I don't know, like science is pretty like nonpartisan, or I guess like when
Okay,
we're
so you're talking about something else.
yeah, I mean I guess like when we talk about like creating incentives for people to organize, like who is doing that, and if it's the government, like if Republicans get control, like what kind of you know like are they going to keep those incentives around, for one, and for
Yeah.
two, like what, like how much damage are they going to do like to the social movements themselves, if they're in charge of like, well, actually, fucking something
So I
chromosome.
was thinking about this. I think what you would do is you'd keep it really simple. Like the only metric you would use for whether or not something gets funding is how many people are actively working on the project. Um, and like the role of the bureaucracy of this initiative would be confirming that people are actually working on the project and doing what they're saying they're doing. And so you'd have some kind of like you know some instrument that measures this. Um, and
An ESG score,
and like it'd be very what
like an ESG score, or
something like I'm sure there's like ways you could do this. Um, and it'd be very objective. Like this is how many people are working on the project, and we know this because we measured it.
Mhm.
Um, and the more people that you get exponentially more funding to do something. Um, and since like there's no like the only incentive is make sure your organization has a lot of people and it's like enduring.
Yeah, but I
And it's
mean
growing.
like the Westboro Baptist Church is a terrible, terrible group that I hate, but like, are they eligible for this funding?
Um, I think the funding would be. I mean, I think it's like this is something I'm not just thinking through. So maybe the best thing to do would be like using funding to grow. So like if there's growth, it's looking at percent growth rather than absolute size. So like if you already have big organizations, well, they're not really going to get funding unless they're actually like growing significantly. Um,
Yeah, sure. But like, I mean, so are you like willing to, like fund the Westboro Baptist Church, like running an AdSense campaign for their website, God hates goths and God hates queers, like .com, in order to grow their social organization movement?
well, I'd say if they were growing, I'd be willing to fund it.
For sure. I mean, so
And I wouldn't be happy about that, but I'd be willing to fund it on the basis of like, okay, people for some reason people are joining this organization and willing to donate their time to the vision of this organization. I'm going to respect that even if I don't really understand why.
right. And I don't, I'm not necessarily advocating for the complete, like for the government to step in and dismantle that organization. But yeah, I have some.
I wasn't really thinking you were.
Right,
I was
right.
just like making my position clear.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, so, like, after the event last weekend, I went to go hang out with some people who told me like they're fleeing the country. Like because like they're like getting death threats and on the short list for getting fucked up, and like so they have to leave now. Um, and like yeah,
Mm.
if we're gonna continue, if we're gonna put resources towards expanding the Westboro Baptist Church like as like a social experiment, then like I don't know, I'm gonna lose more friends. Either
Sure.
to
So
literally violence or
I think that like I said when I was talking to Destiny, that like the first and foremost thing that we want to see go down through this kind of implementation or whatever we're trying to implement is polarization. Um, and to me, it's like I was arguing about this on Reddit. It's like I don't really care if Trump is president if he's actually implementing good policies. Like I don't care if Republicans get credit for good policies if that's what they're doing. I um of course I'm willing to run the risk assessment of like, are they going to use that credit to, be more authoritarian and or like be more, bigoted. But I think like I think we can use that. I think by there's also the argument that if Republicans are earning legitimacy through working together with Democrats to create good policies, that we can start using that as leverage to prevent them from being authoritarian, right? Like the exact same way that Republicans had used that kind of leverage on us in like 2012 and all that kind of stuff. Um, they used it to an insane degree and ended up like, making things a lot worse. But that's kind of what they did. They used the leverage that they had that a lot of things that a lot of bipartisan things were happening in the mid 2000s, and then they said no more because we want these things. And we can just make sure that the things we want are like don't be authoritarian, corrupt, or bigoted.
right. I mean,
um
yeah, I mean, I also like I miss having a non-schizophrenic Republican Party. Um,
yeah.
like I like bipartisan stuff. That's why Biden's probably the best president we've had. Like I think more, he got more bipartisan legislation through than in that those handful of sessions of Congress compared to any other president. And like yeah, like I'm all for that. Like that's how our government is supposed to work. Like it's supposed to require like people to work together. It's not supposed to respond well to populism. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I guess like I don't like like slowly increasing polarization over like random bullshit is I would say is bad. But I don't think polarization in and of itself is intrinsically bad though. Like with what's going on, um, like I think the polarization is good, like personally, because like it's like I wouldn't have a problem with Trump if he was putting in good policies and like maybe taking some credit for the shit that we're doing, but like he's putting in bad policies, blaming us for those bad policies, and then taking credit for our good policies, like while destroying our democracy, weakening our institutions, and like like it's gonna take us like a decade or two in order to recover
So
from from what he's
what
doing.
is I don't really think there's a way to depolarize without like swallowing a bitter pill, that like we have to do like we have to walk the tightrope line between appeasement and coming together no matter what we do in order to reduce polarization.
I mean, to a point, yeah, sure. Like like I don't know, I'm willing to work with like religious people. There's a lot of people I'm willing to work with that I disagree with for sure. I have like no problem with that, but again, like my friends are applying for asylum and fleeing the country because they are in danger, like because of their identity. Like they're have been getting slowly increasing numbers of death threats. And like so now they can't like they're them and their kids are uncomfortable living here because they're in danger. Um, Like, why the fuck should I appease any of these people?
But yeah, I don't think that's why I say you have to draw the fine, you have to walk the fine line, because you should never be doing appeasement under any circumstances.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Um, you're walking the fine line between, um, you know, like obtaining cohesion of like of obtaining a deal where it's like you're gonna get credit for this policy, and you're also going to limit the executive's power to be authoritarian. You're going to limit the executive's power to, you know, censor judges through Twitter.
But I mean, but how do we do that now? Like, because like he's already in power, he's ignoring the judicial branch, and he has no interest in passing anything like through Congress. Like,
so I think what would make sense to me would be something like, we say, okay, here's a bill that makes housing really good. Then it's and then in that bill, we're also just going to add like some random legislation that's like, you know, the executive branch can't, like some like really common sense thing that doesn't really like sound like on the surface that it's attacking Trump, basically. That it's like the executive can't like embezzle money from the government or something like that. Like or like a way like to like something that like makes it explicitly clear that this is illegal. um
well, he who saves his country violates no law. So like again, it's like I don't know. We're just pretty far like down the line is like my problem of like yeah, I like what you're saying, and if like if George Bush was president, or fucking even Reagan, or like someone who wasn't completely schizo, but
I mean, because it's like the next president is going to be like Vance. Like it's going to be someone that is even worse than Trump,
the Pope
or the
doesn't
next
come back from
Republican
yet.
president.
Yeah. I mean, if the Pope doesn't come back from the dead for him, AOC is next. Sorry, non-Fonz.
Yeah. I'm not. I don't know. I don't know who's going to be like that. I'm pretty sure like Republicans are not going to last, but there's always going to be a backlash to the backlash if we're just relying on polarization. So like one thing I was saying earlier was like, or with other people was, if the Democrats suddenly have control of the government after we're in like a deep depression, they're not going to be able to turn that around quickly. And so people are just going to stay mad and then vote in the Republicans the next election.
Yeah, that's the cycle. Republicans fuck up the economy. We enact changes that are that are effective but slow to take hold. People get frustrated because it's not happening fast enough, and so they elect a Republican who fucks up the economy again. Like that is the American cycle for the past handful of decades.
Yeah. So okay. So I guess like if we kind of agree that that's where things are going, like should we really just be on board with like the increasing polarization?
I mean, if this is the path we're going down, then like, yeah, absolutely, like 1000%. Like, I am in like a few fascist Discord servers that like unironically are like, like they hate Trump because they don't think he's going far enough, but it's he's doing all right. And yeah, I mean, if we're just pushing slowly and slowly towards fascism, then yeah, like the polarization is good, because I think fascism is not very effective way of organizing society.
Wait, but the polarization creates more fascists.
I mean, sure. Or I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess like that's the issue is the what is it? Panania calls it the low human capital on the other side. But like, yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of uneducated people who think that the country
Right, but I mean, if we agree that polarization is going to create more of those extremists, then why would we like for every like counter extremist that we create, we're also just creating another extremist,
Well, yeah, because the extremists have power right now, and everyone is unquestioningly on board on that side already.
But we know that the extremists are always going to have power so I'm going to assert that the extremists will always have power because like there's this issue that we don't know how to solve the meaning crisis, and that like a lot of their power rests on like trying to navigate that problem rather than and completely ignoring the material conditions problem, basically.
I mean, I would refute that by saying that like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert are elected officials. But like, I mean, what? Like, there's like Bernie, who's like a soft socialist, like at best. But like there's no fucking like communist like in office right now.
Well, I mean,
like,
doesn't that make things worse that like you have you're not even creating the anti-fascists while you're creating the fascists?
well, that's the problem is that like Democrats moderate, they hold themselves to a standard, and they won't just elect like a batshit insane person who's screeching about like whatever.
So you're saying like we should just completely abandon moderation?
Um,
And-
I mean, at some point, I think we have to. Yeah. Like at some point, enough is enough. I mean, I'm not saying to go pick up arms and start beating up people.
But how does it not reach that point?
I don't know. They chill the fuck out. Like that's like, I mean, I do my part going around and talking to people.
Do you really think that like that's a realistic scenario that Republicans are just going to chill the fuck out in response to Democrats abandoning moderation?
Well, no. Like, I think that abandoning moderation happens when they instead of chilling the fuck out, they just continue to escalate, like they seem to be doing, and like continue to push towards authoritarian policies. Yeah, like at some point we have to. I mean, we necessarily have to abandon moderation. Unless you're fine with just like a fascist takeover and like letting that happen, you know.
I don't know if fighting a fascist takeover is abandoning moderation.
I mean, like, I don't know. Maybe we have different definitions of like fighting a fascist takeover. So like if Trump runs for a third term,
Like I mean like engaging in like a civil war.
yeah, okay, yeah, for sure, yeah. Like if Trump runs again in 2028 somehow, they weekend at Bernie's his fucking fat orange corpse, like and gets elected again, and like like from these first 100 days, like if the next 1382 are continue to go up, and then they keep going up during term 3, like at what point do you think that it's okay to be like, hey, I guess maybe Civil War time?
Well, I guess it's like I'd want to do everything in my power to prevent that from happening or prevent it from getting to that point, and I feel like that comes with moderation.
Yeah, I mean, it comes with moderation. Like now, yeah, like like I will talk to reasonable people now and like try to meet them where they're at. But like again, I'm in like some groups who unironically are advocating for like white ethno nationalism or Christian nationalism or some combination of the two.
Yeah.
Like yeah, I'm not really for that, and if we keep moving in that direction, then I mean, like I don't like those people are not moderates, and like I don't really moderate with them. I mean,
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't think you need to moderate those people at all.
right? I guess like what do you mean by like moderation? Like, I mean, I'm not gonna,
Well, so like it would be like talking about traditional conservative values, like non-insane conservative values, and like trying to put that into bills and trying to give Republicans credit for putting in place things that like make people's lives better. And trying to make Trump as legitimate a president as possible. That's like, and like trying to make him as like a traditional conservative as possible is kind of the um well, plus the risk taking thing, because I don't think traditional conservatives are risk takers. Like, I mean, like it's probably like why we call them conservative. Um, like it's not I don't think they're risk averse either, but this is a new thing, so it's like it's never going to be like the traditional conservative, but um, trying to create a sane conservative administration out of the Trump administration, I think, is harm reduction. Is like not. I think everything is harm reduction. Like everything we've talked about is harm reduction, but my feeling is that that's going to be the most effective harm reduction.
I mean, I guess I don't know what. I mean, yeah, that's us moderating. I don't know how. Like, how do you think that's gonna moderate them if they elect a fucking insane person who tried
Well,
to like overturn democracy, and we just do our best to legitimize everything that he's doing, and then like, what if they elect?
so I don't want to legitimize like the authoritarian stuff. I only want to legitimize like the administration itself. So not so like if the administration is doing something bad, that is something that like you use the possibility of being legitimate as a carrot. Like if you want to do this legitimate thing, you can't be doing this other thing. You can't be like ignoring due process. You can't be censoring judges. You can't be gutting the government unconstitutionally. You can't be doing those things. And trying to build leverage by being bipartisan. Um, and then saying like, but we're going to give you all the credit. Like we're not going to try to like, as long as you're not doing these bad things, like this is going to be your, like we're going to try, like it's like almost like we're going to try to get you reelected even, or like a Republican's reelected. I mean, I don't know. Like you have to balance it because I don't think you want. I don't think you want to lose like the minority power, but it's like I want to explore that idea at least because I definitely see the potential pitfalls there of like you kind of legitimize everything or you make them a good government and then you lose all the power and then it just like spirals out of control again.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like I don't. I would need to be convinced that they give a shit about anything that you just said of like, oh, like, like we gotta tell them like you can't do this. Like
I see.
we can offer them this carrot of being legitimate. And it's like, or I could just do it and fuck you. like, what's stopping them from doing that besides us stopping them from doing that?
I think I see where you're coming from. And like I feel like this is what keeps coming up in my conversations with liberals is like I just need to kind of prove it that like I can create a coalition of conservatives and Republicans that actually wants this thing. And like that people who are pro Trump that think like, oh, this is a good idea. Like I think that would make my argument a lot stronger.
Yeah.
And I think I'm just kind of asserting in the wind without something like that. So I think that makes sense. I think that's fair.
Right. Yeah, no, because that's like I'm super I'm into all this stuff. Like like I think the Constitution is super great. Like I don't know if you've seen that fucking Scalia talk that everyone always talks about of like like gridlock isn't a bug of the system, it's a feature. Like it's not our government isn't meant to ramrod through these radical changes in legislation. It's meant to be this slow, gradual process over time. That's very moderated and controlled. Like rather than every time that the government changes hands with respect to party, that shit doesn't just radically flip over to the other side. I think it's a really cool way of doing things. That's not an accident. But yeah, when someone like Trump shows up and throws all of those norms out of the window and is like, actually I am the law, and actually I have full immunity from any consequences of breaking the law. And even if I could, like he who saves his country violates no law. Like this is like something like Trump is everything our government was, or everything our Constitution was set up to try to prevent. And the guardrails held the first time, but he has learned, he has installed nothing but loyalists, and like it's significantly worse this time. He just has a bunch of
So I think kind of as like part of like, to wrap it up, unless there's more you want to talk about. Like in the meta conversation that like what I'm trying to do is, create an organization of like people that are willing to invest their time into something that probably won't pay back. Um and specifically like invest like this like online debate community. Like maybe I can like all these people that are willing to put their time into politics, what if we were all aligned on what we wanted to see happen? And like is there an argument that I can make? Is there a way to frame it that actually could align everyone? And that's kind of what I want to explore. So that's where I'm coming from, and that's why I think, as an action item, like actually getting conservatives and talking to them, and then showing you that, like, yes, this does actually convince conservatives, and like there is some truth to this, like, um, this psychoanalysis that I'm doing, right? Like that while they are saying that on the surface that they really care about the economy, they actually don't really care about the economy. Um, like how true is that? Because I think I can make all the assertions I want. Nothing is going to prove it other than actually going out and talking to people.
Right. Yeah, no, I super agree. Yeah, I'm super like on board with this. I love, you know, chatting about this stuff
Okay.
and
Yeah.
arguing politics, and I like, yeah, I feel like you have a really good solid idea here and a good solid like foundation of like, hey, like, what if we could have a bunch of people who, had, like, kind of differing values, but like we're all still, like America first, or like, like we're all MAGA, but like not in like the, fuck everything about this country sort of way, but in the actual
Yeah.
like, like let's do something cool and like something, maybe not even like radical, but just, something meaningful that, people can be a part of and make, people proud to be in this country, and, feel like they're
Right.
contributing to something, and, and not just fall into the void of being a, member of the global community, but like, a fucking American who's doing American shit. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a super cool idea for sure. I'm super in support of it, and yeah, down to help however I
Cool.
can. Yeah,
Yeah. I'll continue talking to people and hopefully getting some conservatives on board to kind of bolster my argument a little bit, because I think you're right that it doesn't really make sense for you to fully be on board when it's not really clear that it actually is convincing to conservatives.
right, right, for sure. Cool, dude.
Right. I,
Well,
I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
yeah, of course, dude. Yeah, anytime, always around. Yeah, also appreciate you chatting with
Likewise.
me. Yeah, for sure. All right, man. Have a good
All
night.
right. See ya.
Peace. Wow, what a fuck. All right. Got him. Well, that's cool. Yeah. Listen, we need more. We need more people like that. More high level ideas. Big picture, hopes and dreams type uh, thinkers. Uh, God damn, dude, Trump is just so uniquely fucking awful that it's really hard to contextualize that specifically. Jesus Christ. Man, I want to play Blatcher. Staring at this goddamn. Well, I don't know. I might go play video games. Or go watch anime. Oh, note to self. What the fuck is happening here? Hilarious. Okay. All right. Well, it's fun hanging out with y'all. Thanks for stopping by and all that. I'll be back, very soon. Something I actually, you know what? How long is this? It's very long. Hell yeah. You know what? I'm gonna start reading this because it seems cute. Uh, uh, but first, music. Wow. Holy shit. JK. Oh. I don't want Google wide bind. Fuck you. The United States is between scripts. For roughly 4 decades, the free market ethos championed by President Ronald Reagan drove economic policy and pervaded American culture. A broad, bipartisan consensus assured Americans that the markets knew best. They were not just efficient, but wise and fair. The state, the thinking went, should not encroach on the natural order produced by the churning of free market forces. And the state did not. Between 1982 and 2015, the market capitalization of all publicly traded companies went from around 35% of GDP to roughly 95%. The private sector, under what many call neoliberalism, boomed. But starting roughly a decade ago, neoliberalism began to lose its hold over American life and over policymakers in Washington. For many Americans, globalization has become a dirty word, a phenomenon blamed for ills as various as inequality, the loss of industrial jobs, the risky ballooning of the financial sector, and the rise of geopolitical adversaries. U.S. leaders have strikingly rejected the assumptions of prior decades. President Donald Trump, in his first term, launched a salvo against neoliberal certainties. He evinced little interest in social spending cuts, imposed tariffs on foes and friends alike, professed sympathy for organized labor, and claimed to protect U.S. companies and workers from foreign competition. His successor, Joe Biden, broke from the conventional free market tenets that had framed much of his own political career. He maintained many of Trump's tariffs on China. At home, Biden tried to build a new kind of American industrial policy, one that rested on the premise that the state can and must shape markets. He restored antitrust protections to their pre-Reagan era extent, and he billed himself as the most pro-union president in American history, becoming the first U.S. president to join a union strike when he walked the picket line with workers in Michigan in 2023. Oh. By his own account, he came into office to move past trickle-down economics and get rid of it for everybody. To be sure, not everybody is reading from the same script yet. As much as Kamala Harris, Biden's vice president and anointed successor, cringe, embraced many of his economic ideas. Her presidential campaign also distanced itself from many of them. She proposed a fair, lower tax hike on long-term stock market gains for the wealthiest Americans than did Biden, and seemed ready to back away from Biden's more forceful antitrust policy. In his second term, Trump has ratcheted up the use of tariffs to a feverish degree, and some of his cabinet appointments suggest deepening sympathy for organized labor, industrial policy, and pre-Reagan antitrust measures. But in other areas, Trump's fiscal policy seems traditionally neoliberal. In its first months, for example, the Republican-controlled Congress looked eager to extend the tax cuts Trump introduced in his first term. Doing so would add between $2 to $4 trillion to U.S. debt, depending on spending cuts, another typically neoliberal ambition. But in the breathless politics of recent years, one can discern the outlines of a new brand of democratic capitalism embraced by leaders and thinkers across the political spectrum. Unimaginably dubbed post-neoliberalism by many, it offers an array of ideas and policies geared toward addressing the power imbalances hardwired into markets, regaining some clarity over what markets can and cannot do, and, not least, revisiting whether present economic arrangements are fundamentally good for Americans and for American society. Post-neoliberalism's proponents argue that markets tend to concentrate wealth and create power asymmetries. These imbalances create problems for individuals and for an economy as a whole, so it is government's job to correct them. Otherwise, these imbalances can thwart competition, and before long, capitalism slides into corporatism, the domination of the economy by a handful of powerful groups. States have to manage the economy and ensure that imbalances don't affect its proper functioning. Moreover, markets are not ends unto themselves, post-neoliberals say. but tools for societies to pursue worthy national aims. This post-neoliberal script has adherents on both sides of the political aisle. That makes it different from past pendulum swings. Neoliberalism and Keynesianism before it were largely championed by one party in response to the practical challenges of their day. Franklin Roosevelt, a Democrat, ushered in Keynesianism with its emphasis on state intervention to shore up aggregate demand to solve the Great Depression and mobilize the country for war. The next Republican to enter the White House, Dwight Eisenhower, did not dramatically roll back Keynesian policies. Decades later, Reagan, a Republican, offered neoliberalism to salve the stagflation of the 1970s. The next Democrat to become president, Bill Clinton, won election in 1992 in part by stressing his adherence to Reagan's free market dictums. In both cases, a set of ideas became so dominant the opposing party eventually acceded to them as a matter of political necessity. The emerging script, however, does not seem to be following this historical pattern. Parallel realignments on both the left and the right suggest the rise of what the New York Times journalist David Leonhardt has called a new centrism that recognizes that neoliberalism failed to deliver. This new centrism unites the Democratic Senator Chris Murphy in Connecticut, a state heavily reliant on the financial sector, and the Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna in Silicon Valley, with lawmakers from more purple congressional districts, upstate New York's Pat Ryan and Pennsylvania's Chris Deluzio routinely issue calls to, in Deluzio's word, break free from the wrong for decades zombie horde of neoliberal economists. Republican senators such as Josh Hawley and Bernie Moreno claim to support labor and express wariness of free trade and concentrations of wealth. The economic system of the last 30 years, nothing sacred, Hawley has said. It's not inevitable. It was a choice. And we have it in our power to choose differently now and for the better. Public opinion surveys consistently bared out the popularity of many post-neoliberal positions, including on industrial policy, unions, and stronger anti-monopoly and consumer protections. The economics profession itself is changing too. The work of several recipients of recent Nobel Prizes for economics, including last year's winners, focuses on how political power and market power shape up macroeconomic outcomes. The measure of any economic philosophy, post-neoliberalism included, lies in how well it addresses the major problems of the day. And across the gamut of these problems, the return of a peer adversary in China, the need for fairer, faster economic growth, flagging faith in democracy itself, and the urgency of a politically plausible route to decarbonizing, the still emerging post-neoliberal vision fares better than its predecessor. Reverting to the neoliberalism that helped create these problems is not an option. Moments of transition, however, are dangerous. Just as it was hardly clear that Keynesianism would win out over darker, more domineering alternatives in Europe, there are many possible versions of a post-neoliberalism that could take hold, not all of them good. Much depends on how societies shape what comes after neoliberalism and how they navigate the turbulence along the way. Balance and build. Any given time, societies swell within intellectual constraints. These paradigms determine understandings of how economies function and the values they should serve, and they help define what governments should and should not do. The power of these ideas rests in how they become so taken for granted that they persist for long periods without challenge. Beliefs such as, the king is divine, for instance, ordered every aspect of political and economic life in many parts of the world for centuries. These narratives are rarely right or wrong in a normative sense. They arise because they help solve pressing, contemporaneous problems. As the problems evolve, however, these governing philosophies become less useful, making way for the next script. In many parts of the world, the radical belief in popular sovereignty undid the hold of the notion of the divine right of kings, just as expanding commerce created a wealthy merchant class eager for greater political say. In the 19th century, as the United States grappled with the Industrial Revolution and the imperatives of westward expansion, it relinquished mercantilism for the broad permission structure of laissez-faire capitalism to keep pace with galloping technological process and to settle the country's vast interior. The economic philosophy worked well enough until it didn't. The Great Depression and the mobilization for World War II required different ideas, an opening that Keynesianism filled for another 3 decades. Where's the fucking bread? Bretton Woods. By the late 1970s, society again had new problems, including social unrest, energy shocks, and stagflation, which ushered in an embrace of free market neoliberalism. Neoliberalism can be broadly defined as a deep confidence in the capacity of markets to allocate capital and a corresponding skepticism of government's ability to structure economies, with a tendency to favor deregulation, free trade, and unfettered movement of capital across borders. It spread across the West, and, at least in the United States, performed well for a time. Growth picked up, inflation came down. But eventually, neoliberal ideas, too, ran their course, proving unable to solve problems such as lagging growth and accelerating climate change, and creating and exacerbating others. From 1980 to the early 2020s, inequality in the United States soared, with the top 1,000th of the population doubling its share of overall wealth to around 14%. The top 1% now holds roughly 30% of the country's wealth. Manufacturing shrank from 22% to 9% of non-farm employment during that period. And these same policies not only hastened the rise of a peer adversary, China, but also left the United States highly dependent on Chinese wares. This is like a weird framing. Manufacturing employment has definitely dropped, but our manufacturing output, I don't know, interesting. The emerging post-neoliberal consensus rests on 2 ideas. It can be called the imperatives to balance and to build. Those who believe that the U.S. economy needs greater balance observe that markets tend to concentrate imbalances in economic power. As asymmetries have grown between the financial sector and the rest of the economy, between big corporations and their smaller competitors, and between China's state-driven economy and the more market-oriented economies of its trading partners, they have left consumers with fewer options and workers with lower pay. Most people now have less control over their economic lives. At Amazon fulfillment centers, which employ the majority of the company's 1.5 million workers, vending machines are stocked not just with snacks, but with painkillers. Based. The grocery delivery firm Instacart recently unveiled an artificial intelligence-enabled price-setting service for grocery stores, advertising the ability to set food prices for individual consumers based on their willingness to pay. In aggregate, such imbalances eventually stunt innovation and an economy's growth. Post-neoliberals believe that it is the job of government to address these disparities, not least because they bleed into politics. And so I'm actually, I don't know, not willingness to pay, but ability to pay. I'm actually for that. In policy terms, this quest for balance has led in various directions. It has re-energized support for organized labor and a more aggressive push for antitrust and consumer protection efforts. It has seeded more skepticism of free trade, and it has caused economists and policymakers alike to question the size of the financial sector in the real economy. For instance, across their terms, Trump and Biden both favored closing the carried interest loophole central to the business models of hedge funds and private equity. Read about that later. But simply balancing the existing economy isn't enough. Governments need to make their economies more productive and keep growing in the years ahead, figure out ways to decarbonize quickly and at scale, and contend with peer challengers, as the United States must do with China. Leaders cannot merely try to make the economy fairer than it is. They must be willing to build, to use the power and purse of the state to directly increase the supply of certain essentials such as housing, clean energy, and advanced computing. The state can return to the business of building again, partly through more affirmative public investment and partly through breaking the choke points, including those imposed by government regulation that make these goods too scarce and costly in the first place. Government should be willing to reclaim its unique role in setting bold societal aims, while also taking seriously the risk of the $1 million toilet problem, so named after the proposed public toilet in San Francisco in 2020 that, thanks to various well-intentioned regulations, was slated to cost $1.7 million and take more than 2 years to build. It's actually... Traditional markets operate well in many areas of the economy, including in the making of furniture, brewing of lattes, and provision of haircuts. But the experience of recent decades suggests that markets can miss some essentials. Only active government policy can properly organize and supplement markets in producing many things that countries cannot do without, such as vaccines, a stable manufacturing base, quality housing, childcare, and a decarbonized economy. Balancing the economy and building more are two sides of a single coin. Neither on its own can fully reckon with the country's urgent to-do list. Simply encouraging production will do little to address how billionaires and $1 trillion revenue companies use political clout to bend economic rules in their favor. Addressing those distortions will not speed decarbonization or prepare the United States to compete with a geopolitical peer. A better capitalism must draw from both the impulse to balance and the impulse to build, and be willing to discard the neoliberal nostrums that see such concerted state action as anathema. Jesus Christ. Post-neoliberal turn. Even critics of the post-neoliberal turn in economics concede that some post-neoliberal fiscal policies, such as the CHIPS and Science Act, boosted national security by aiming to reduce dependence on China for semiconductors and speed decarbonization through the clean energy investments of the Inflation Reduction Act. But when it comes to delivering stronger, more broadly shared growth, skeptics accuse post-neoliberalism of falling considerably short of its lofty goals. As the Harvard economist Jason Furnham wrote in these pages in March, inflation, unemployment, interest rates, and government debt will all be higher in 2024 than they were in 2019. From 2019 to 2023, inflation-adjusted household income fell, and the poverty rate rose. I don't know if that's true, actually. Such policy missteps, according to Furman, all stem from a broader unwillingness to contend with trade-offs. But looking at the right benchmarks showed that that post-neoliberal economic policy, evident to a large degree in the actions of the Biden administration, righted the ship and kept the country afloat and sailing at a reasonable clip. Unemployment in 2022 and 2023 was marginally lower than in 2019. For example, no small feat given the COVID-19 pandemic that had transpired in the years between. And unemployment ticked up only in 2024, largely because of higher labor force participation. Inflation-adjusted household income by 2023 was only barely below 2019 levels. Household income for 2024 is not yet available. By the first half of 2024, inflation-adjusted wage growth outpaced the same period in 2019. Perhaps the strongest indictment leveled at the Biden administration is that the COVID stabilization package, known as the American Rescue Plan, was too large. Furman points to various output models to show that a much smaller package could have stabilized the economy. But those same models significantly underestimated the need for stimulus in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis. The Biden administration insisted that it would not make the mistake the Obama administration had by spending too modestly, and that it regarded the harms of overshooting as preferable to the damage of undershooting. It was as clearly stated a trade-off as one could conjure. It provided a good trade. Yes, overshooting contributed to inflation, but not much. Most estimates have found that all the demand-side policies made by Biden, Trump, and the Federal Reserve during the pandemic raised inflation by only about 2% on average. The Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, for example, determined that Biden's rescue package contributed just 0.6 percentage points to inflation across 2021 and 2022. The recent years of high inflation, which peaked at around 7% using the Federal Reserve's preferred measure of year-over-year personal consumption expenditures inflation. Inflation was overwhelmingly caused by supply-side shocks that were out of the administration's control. In the meantime, the United States returned to pre-pandemic levels of growth faster than other rich countries. It also gained a strong labor market. From spring of 2022 to 2024, the country enjoyed its longest stretch of unemployment rates below 4% in over 50 years. Employment of people between the ages of 25 and 54, known as prime age employment, a better metric of labor market strength and unemployment since it incorporates the labor force participation rate, was higher under Biden than under Trump. For the architects of these Biden-era policies, including me, this was no small point. Drawing people into the labor market was seen as crucial to overcoming the sluggish aggregate demand and productivity of the years before COVID. Halfway there. In the end, Biden's macroeconomic experiment helped the United States outpace all other G7 nations in GDP growth, as well as pre-COVID projections. Inflation-adjusted wages went up and rose for most low-wage earners. According to research by the economist David Autor, Dubé, and Annie McGrew, wages at the bottom rose so much that wage inequality shrank, undoing 1/3 of its rise since 1980. In the past 5 years, economic track record has been far more good than bad. Furman is quite right, however, to caution policymakers against reverting to conventional approaches and to call for a renewal of economic policy thinking. U.S. macroeconomic policy must now shift to more aggressively tackling high prices. Here again, the task of keeping prices down is suited to post-neoliberal policies. Not all kinds of inflation are the same. It is worth recovering the monetary policy tradition of distinguishing between supply-side and demand-side drivers of inflation. This distinction was standard practice among academics and Federal Reserve policymakers before the neoliberal economist Milton Friedman's insistence that inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. In Friedman's view, the source of inflation did not matter. All that was needed to address it was to constrict the money supply by raising interest rates. Economic policymakers should instead isolate the causes of inflation and deal with them accordingly. Global inflation since 2021 has come primarily from supply-side inflationary forces: pandemic-induced supply chain bottlenecks, climate change-induced crop failures, transit routes blocked by geopolitical upheaval, and shortages of energy and housing. If anything, the world is likely in for more supply-side shocks. The standard method of dealing with inflation, raising interest rates, is at best irrelevant and in many cases actively counterproductive. Instead, government should address the root causes. They should build more buffer stocks to get ahead of crop failures, find ways to keep housing and energy costs from spiraling out of control, and tax companies' windfall profits to curb price gouging during emergencies. The post-neoliberal economic experiments of the past few years in the United States yielded the strongest GDP and productivity growth of any G7 country, the strongest labor market in decades, and striking declines in inequality. This is good news, not least because the pressing tasks to come, notably tackling the ballooning cost of essentials such as healthcare, contending with supply-side inflation, and maximizing the net benefits of new technologies such as artificial intelligence, all require most post-neoliberal policy, not less. No free lunch. People talk this much. Nowhere is the break with neoliberalism clearer or more bipartisan than in foreign economic policy. China's trade surplus with the rest of the world reached nearly $1 trillion in 2024. This fact helps explain the strong bipartisan consensus, now entering its second decade, that unfettered free trade is not an obvious good. Both parties largely agree on the need to strengthen the country's economic and technological competitiveness with respect to China, and they work together in laying the conceptual tracks to rid the United States of dependence on China for economically and strategically vital inputs, such as ingredients for many generic pharmaceuticals and rare earth minerals for smartphones, and imposing many rounds of tariffs, export controls, safeguards against economic coercion. But significant fissures remain. Thus far, the second Trump administration has not clarified what vision its tsunami of tariffs on China is meant to advance, or how, if at all, allies fit in. In the view of the Biden administration, the challenges the United States faces, lacking growth, the hollowing out of its industrial base, inequality, damage to democracy, competition with China, and the need to decarbonize to combat climate change are hardly unique to the United States. U.S. policymakers must construct answers that work for the United States, and not the United States alone. The new Washington Consensus, as it became known, the Biden administration's offer to its friends, articulated over two major addresses in 2023 and 2024 by National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, amounted to a major reorientation of U.S. foreign policy. The United States' investments in physical, technology, and energy infrastructure, Sullivan insisted, would create positive global spillovers. But Washington would still need its friends to join in, adopting their own versions of technology and decarbonization-minded industrial policies. In exchange, the United States would reconstitute its foreign policy to better help its partners. U.S. policymakers understood that many of their allies are not nearly as wealthy and able to match the kinds of investments that the Biden administration was making in industrial policy. But it could better support friends by supplying them with more nimble financing, be it through expanded World Bank lending, more muscular U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, which finances new infrastructure projects around the world, a new U.S. sovereign wealth fund, or a new clean energy financing authority. This fiscal firepower would be developed alongside a new generation of multilateral arrangements, including a critical minerals club, a trade pact for clean steel and aluminum, a G7 clean infrastructure financing entity to compete with Chinese overseas investments in infrastructure, and a common carbon border adjustment. A new global minimum tax would also generate badly needed revenue. More important, it would mark the world's first meaningful collective step towards taming financial globalization, which has freed capital to hopscotch across the world in a way that workers cannot. As capital grew light on its feet, companies squeezed labor by threatening to move abroad. After a few decades of gawking at the problem, Washington, under the Biden administration, rallied 139 countries to do something. The resulting agreement, which set a 15% minimum tax on multinational corporations, has been implemented by roughly 90 countries. It failed to gain Senator Joe Manchin's support during negotiations about the Inflation Reduction Act, however, preventing the United States from joining the pact, a position that Trump has signaled he will maintain. Alongside the global minimum tax, the Biden administration showed other signs of treating globalizations not as an unalterable force of nature, but as something shaped by policy choices. When auto workers were organizing at Volkswagen and Mercedes plants in Tennessee and Alabama in June of 2024, the White House warned Germany that German companies should not interfere with unionization votes in the United States. It brought new labor cases under the terms of the United States Trade Pact with Mexico and Canada, alleging harms to Mexican workers in sectors such as telecommunications, steel, and food production. Although small and halting, these steps showed that governments can reassert democratic control over the forces of globalization, but only by cooperating with others. Reorienting U.S. foreign policy in this way is a long-term project. Prospects for progress over the next years are dim, but the Trump administration might sustain momentum on at least some fronts. In his first term, Trump created the Development Finance Corporation. Through a mix of reforms and greater funding, he is now working to vastly increase its lending muscle. He is also considering standing up a sovereign wealth fund. Both entities are likely to invest in several areas of bipartisan interest, such as in enhancements to electric grids, in nuclear and geothermal power, and in critical minerals and battery supply chain. Fuck the LPO, I guess. For all the chaos and strife of the tariffs in the opening act of his second term, Trump's U.S.-Canada-Mexico trade deal, also known as CUMS, which went into effect in 2020, and his negotiations with China during his first term indicate some ability not just to pick economic fights, but to try to settle them. The biggest drag on post-neoliberalism is the failure of ambition and imagination of its architects, including me. In 1994, a group of countries led by the United States established the Bretton Woods system. Oh, there we go. Bretton. Remaking in a single summer the entire global economic and financial architecture. Apart from developing the global minimum tax with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the Biden administration opted against mounting confabs of the scale and significance of Bretton Woods. When the administration did make efforts toward a new generation of multilateral agreements, such as the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework and its Latin American counterpart, America's Partnership for Economic Prosperity, these were insufficient. Not because they did not involve tariff reduction, as many of their critics argued, but because their obligations were mostly not binding and their incentive structures were weak. In other cases, such as global minimum tax and the US-EU global arrangement on clean steel and aluminum, the problem was not so much insufficient ambition in the design, but that Washington was ultimately unwilling to jeopardize broader transatlantic relation to pressure Europe to sign on within the available political window. It turns out there are no free lunches in post-neoliberal economics either. Real solutions, although cost-effective, still cost something. Jesus Christ, reading is hard. All that money can't buy. Perhaps the most important question about what should follow neoliberalism is one that societies have largely forgotten how to ask. 4 decades of neoliberalism have so thoroughly taught policymakers that the role of government should be limited that public debates about the economy are now constricted to discussions about growth and distribution, the overall size and proportionate slicing of the pie. But what of its content? Government should also concern themselves with encouraging the economic arrangements that best enable democratic self-governance and serve to buttress civic life. Alright, 3/4 of the way through. Woo. In this sense, Biden's brand of post-neoliberalism fed the body but not the soul. It focused on the material economic questions. It also warned of the dangers to democracy. But, for the most part, these were separate endeavors. It never posed the question of what the good life is, or sought to guarantee the economic necessities of shared self-rule. Collective participation of citizens in shaping their economic and political institutions, rather than having those structures determined by markets or technocratic elites. To ask this question is to dust off an age-old debate in American political thought between liberalism, confusingly named since it draws adherents from across the political spectrum, which defines freedom more in individual terms as the capacity to choose one's own end, and republicanism, distinct from the American political party, is the same fucking points I was making the panel last week, which suggests that freedom depends on sharing and self-government. The two are not inherently in tension. They have coexisted in different proportions throughout the country's history. In the mid-20th century, however, liberalism began to predominate to such an extent that republicanism and its concern with the civic consequence of economic choices largely faded from view. The arrival of neoliberalism and its markets know best ethos provided a handy companion for liberalism's discomfort with adjudicating debates over the public good. It was much easier to outsource them to the market. Charles Schultz, who chaired the Council of Economic Advisors under President Jimmy Carter, celebrated this turn to the market as a source of comedy. Democratic majoritarian policies necessarily imply some minority who disapprove of each particular decision, he wrote in 1977. By contrast, relationships in the market are a form of unanimous consent arrangement, where individuals can act voluntarily on the basis of mutual advantage. Now, over 40 years later, the cost of leaving these questions to markets is clear. Americans have never had more choice, but they are miserable. They suffer from loneliness, addiction to opioids and to technology, and an acute vulnerability to conspiracy theories. The longing for what the philosopher Michael Sandel calls a public life of larger meaning hasn't gone away, and that desire can find undesirable expressions in authoritarian populism or other forms of extremism. Fundamentalists rush in, Sandel warns, where liberals fare to tread. Okay, I definitely see. Dude ripped all of his. Kidding. Liberalism and republicanism, then, are perhaps more codependents than competitors. Liberalism, without republicanism, fails to deliver on its aims of bolstering individual choice. It leaves larger questions of meaning unanswered and allows authoritarians to propose their own solutions. It neglects the extent to which people want a say in shaping the economic forces over their lives. In short, bringing liberalism and republicanism back into closer balance may be key to saving liberalism. Some American politicians are attempting such a revival. In 2023, Murphy, the Democratic senator, called on his fellow leaders to return to square one. What makes a good life? Filled with purpose, meaning, and happiness. And what does government need to do, and not do, so that more people have access to this life? Conservatives, such as Hawley, Senator Tom Cotton, and Secretary of State Mark Rubio, have criticized surrendering civic reasoning to markets and called for a capitalism that enlists markets to serve families, not the other way around. Just how the spirit becomes flesh isn't straightforward. Still, there are a few broad aims to consider, starting with giving people more say in the economic forces governing their lives. Legislation that would curb the power of both algorithmic pricing and addictive social media now sits before Congress. That would be a fine place to start. I don't know. Inevitable and yet uncertain. One of the hallmarks of economic scripts, whether under Keynesianism, neoliberalism, or the dawning post-neoliberalism, is that they spread across the ideological spectrum such that they become synonymous with society's understanding of capitalism overall. In truth, capitalism leaves room for near limitless permutations of forms of government action. Neoliberalism has no greater claim to the capitalist mantle than Keynesianism had before it, or that neoliberalism's successor will have. Even so, what supplants neoliberalism could well prove darker than what it replaced. But there is no going back, not to the heyday of neoliberalism in the 1980s and 1990s, or to some sepia-tinted vision of Roosevelt's Keynesianism. The best outcomes for the United States presume that Americans focus not on denying the coming economic dispensation, but on shaping it. I like this article. I feel like there's, I don't know, whatever. I'm not a fucking economist, so I guess I probably shouldn't question as much as I want to, but I feel like some of these numbers are weird. But yeah, no, I like the ideas. Like, obviously, I don't know. I guess I don't appreciate how much markets actually shape individuals' lives. You know, I don't know. I guess I kind of feel like there's room in the economy for people to do like what they want, you know, whatever brings them joy. You know, for the most part. I mean, whatever. You know, like if you want to be a photographer or a DJ, like you're just gonna have to do weddings. That's just the fucking rule. You have to. And they suck. They're miserable. They're not fun. But you know, like if you want to DJ for fun, if you want to take photos of your friends, like doing weddings is the easiest path to making that economically viable, like as a career. You know, unless you're making your own like music, or you know, become a really famous photographer. So. But yeah, it's a cute idea. I don't know. I guess it would be really cool if we could see the U.S. economy orient itself more towards, you know, the future of technology. You know, we're gonna need researchers for AI, and we need to develop new, you know, green energy innovations, technologies that we could then sell to the rest of the world, which would be It'd be cool. It would be cool if we were focusing on that instead of fucking coal or steel. It's like, whatever. There's nothing wrong with those jobs. You know, whatever. If you make steel, it's fine to be proud of that. But also, Jesus fucking Christ. Like, we have better stuff to do. You know, we have, I mean, I'd be way less annoyed by it if we didn't already have, you know, pretty low unemployment. If people weren't already busy, like, doing things. But, you know, I'm supposed to be like that. Cool. Anyways, blah blah blah. Do the YouTube stuff. Like and subscribe. If you disagree with me, come fight me. Especially if you're a New Zealand coward. But yeah. I love you all. You're great. Thanks for stopping by. Have a good rest of your night.